Hello and welcome to the final section of this course, the Soundboard app. This is where we're going to take all the learning that we've accumulated this far, put it together in a really nice polished app, and learn a few tricks of the trade about, what is the best user experience when they want to play sound and they want to record sound. It's going to be awesome. So first we're going to set up the UI. I'm going to go through a sketch of an app, show you exactly what it is that we want to build, and then get sort of everything looking okay, but it's not until we actually implement it that it's going to be functional. So the next step from there is going to be allowing the user to record some audio. Again, we're going to have to get our recorder all set up. Next, we're going to have to play back some audio so that the user can confirm, yeah, this is, something that I actually want to save. Then we'll let that user save that piece of audio, and then when they come back to sort of the home screen of the app, it should have all the sounds that they've previously recorded showing up there, including the one that they just recorded, and then hitting one of them to play it back should all be a seamless flowing experience. So let's go ahead and start first with setting up the UI. First thing that we're going to do is go through that sketch. I think it's so important to go through sketches. I'm going to talk about why that's such a big deal. But next we're going to move on and just create the visual part of this app so that then we can focus on the recording and the audio playback. So let's go ahead and move to our sketch now. So here we have the sketch for this app that we're going to create, and I referred to it as the Talk Boy. I've called it the soundboard before, but the basic idea is if you've ever seen Home Alone, this is kind of like the Talk Boy that they reference in that movie. But basically what we want to have happen here is someone has a bunch of list of sounds that they've previously recorded, so they can tap on any one of them and have them play. Now to create one of these sounds, they would go ahead and hit the plus button here. This takes them to a new view controller where they can first start recording a button, and then while they're recording, it should turn to say, stop, so that then when they record, they can stop it. Not until they have something recorded. We should have the play button, text field here, this add button, this should all be grayed out. But once they have finished recording something, then they should be able to have this button be enabled. They could hit the play button, hear back what the recording sounds like, and then, if they wanted to, they could start, recording a different one if they want to, but then they could give it a name and then go ahead and hit that add button to then save that. Okay, so that's the whole process to record, and you can see how much simpler this is than what we had before, right? All those sort of random buttons on the screen there for playing and recording audio, like this is a lot more seamless. Like the user only has access to buttons, 2 of them at the time, and they really just can't mess anything up. So someone finishes all this, hits add, it will take them back to this view controller where their new sound should be showing up inside of this view controller. Now the other special thing that we want to implement is this option to delete any sound. So, let's say someone, messed up on a sound, or they realize, I don't really want this anymore. They can swipe left, hit the delete button, and it will actually delete that sound from their app. So I just want to talk about real quick why these sketches are so important. I myself many times get ideas for apps and I just think, oh, because I'm an app developer, I could go make that. And I get super excited about some idea that I have. So I rush to my computer, fire up Xcode, I'm making a project. The first 2 hours go by and things are great. And I sort of hit this point where I don't even know what I'm building anymore. I kind of get stuck and it's like, what should happen when someone does this, or when someone does that, or how am I going to fix this part? And I realize I don't really know where I'm going. And it's almost as if the time that I've already spent has now been wasted, because now at some point inevitably I start drawing on a piece of paper what it is that I'm trying to create, and it's like, well, I guess if I'm going to do that way, I shouldn't have been doing that. And so I'm just telling you from experience, before you start any app, even if you're so excited about it, you've got to draw it out on paper, because if you don't do that, you're going to spend so much time sort of lost in this middle ground of maybe the app could do this, maybe it won't, I'm not really sure, and you'll just sort of die in that middle ground. Okay, so thanks for listening and sitting through my lecture there. Let's go ahead and create this. So we need a new Xcode project. So I'm going to do File, New, and I want a project. So let's have it be a single view application. I'm going to call this the Soundboard. We want to use Swift. It's important this time, make sure you have use core data checked there. We'll go ahead and hit next, and I'm going to save this onto the desktop right alongside our other project. Okay, so as always, I just want to make sure that this is working. So I'm going to select iPhone 8. That's my device as of right now that I love testing on. So I'll just go ahead and hit the run button there. Okay, we'll make sure that that works. And once we've seen that this has succeeded, looks good. Next, we need to move on to actually getting the visual part of this all set up. So if we look back at the sketch, all of this has to be contained inside of a navigation controller. And this should be a table view controller, which then when you tap on something in here, takes you to a view controller, which has some custom stuff. So let's go ahead and move over to our storyboard. And like I said, we want to have a table view controller. So I'm going to go ahead and click drag one of those out there. And we actually want this table view controller to be the starting point for our app. So we're going to move this little arrow from our initial view controller to this one. Now we can actually delete this view controller. So have it selected in the left side menu. If you don't have this, you can hit this little button to make it appear. But select that view controller, hit delete, get rid of it, which also means you should get rid of this view controller.swift. So I'm going to delete that as well and say move to trash. I just want it completely gone from my project. All right, so now that I have this table view controller, I want to embed this in a navigation controller. So I'm going to go up to editor here and I'm going to say embed in navigation controller. Okay, go ahead and select that. And you can see all of a sudden this magic happened, that it made this navigation controller and it, now has it as the initial entry point for the app. And then it, passed my table view controller to be the root view controller of that. The next step for us is we've got to make it so that there's like a little plus button so that we can, go ahead and create a new sound. So we're going to be searching for a button, and not any old button. We want the bar button item. Make sure you have this selected, not normal button. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom up here a little bit, and I'm going to drag and drop this bar button item into the top right. Now, to make it a plus, you could just double tap here and, do like the plus command there, but that kind of looks like a weenie plus. If you go to the property inspector here, you can change this from being a custom to something like add, and that gives you the nice big plus button. There's some other really cool images here, like compose. That could be one that you could do if you wanted to, whatever. Let's see, play. I guess you could maybe possibly get away with that, but I think probably add is the way to go here. That's sort of a universal knowledge. Oh, if I hit plus, I'm adding something new, I'm creating something. So we've got that nice plus button, which then means we can create this view controller. So we'll go back to Xcode, and we want a new view controller. So we'll just click drag this out to the storyboard, okay? And we want to have a segue automatically happen when someone hits this button. So with this button selected, go ahead and hold down on the control key and do a click drag onto this view controller. And we want this to be a show segue. That basically means that we can go back and it does a nice little transition. So you'll notice then that takes us here. And once we're here, this is where we would want to do recording. We'd like to make a new sound. And so we should probably tell the user about that. And you can see if we try and, double tap here to create a new title, it's not there. That's because we have to have a navigation item. By default, there was one provided for us here, right? Like if we had double clicked, I'm going to eat my words. I was going to say we should be able to see that. Looks like we're going to have to select the navigation item here. But here we could select it, go to title, and say something like soundboard, just like that. And you can see that, kind of gives some nice style to the app here. We want to say something like new sound. But to do that, we're going to have to create a new, if you just search for navigation item. So you just take this navigation item, drop it anywhere on top of this view controller. And now I can go specify that title to be something like new sound. Okay, so we're getting really close here. Really the last thing that we need is just this set of buttons like the record, the play, the file name, and that button. So what we're going to do is just add those. So we first need some buttons, regular old buttons. So I'm going to place this first one here, and I'm going to be specific like that. I want this to be in the center of the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and click my constraints down here, and I want to say this is horizontally in container. That centers it, makes it look great there. Then I need to specify how far from the top that this should be. So I'm going to go and hit what I call the TIE fighter, but this is where you can add some constraints. So I'm going to hit the top portion here. I'll just leave what the default is. That looks pretty good. Now let's go ahead and give it a name. So this should be the record button. So I'm going to go ahead and double click and call this the record button. Next, below that, we need to add the play button. So I'm going to go ahead and do a drag drop. Okay. And again, we want this guy here to be centered. So we'll go ahead and add that constraint. Then we wanted a certain distance from this button, so I'm going to go ahead and do a control drag and say that there's some vertical spacing there. And this should be renamed to record. All right, so we've got, no, this is the play button. All right, I was going to say, what, we're recording twice here? This doesn't sound simple and intuitive for the user. Next, we need to add a text field where they can give a sound name. So let's go ahead and search for a text field. Go ahead and drag one out there. Okay, we're going to try and place this in the center, but I'm going to have this go to a certain distance, which essentially will center it. We're going to go to our TIE Fighter friend here and say, this should maybe, let's try like 30 off from each side. Go ahead and add those constraints so it's, you know, nice big width there. And we can do a control drag up to the play button so that they have a certain amount of vertical spacing. Great. Inside of here, we want this to be, you know, have the sound name. And so we can go ahead and actually specify here, you know, some sort of text that we wanted, or better yet, a placeholder text. So I'm going to say something like sound name there. So that's what people know that that will be. And we should go ahead and make this centered because, you know, we've kind of been going with the center vibe here. Let's specify that there. Really, the last step that we just need is an add button. So we'll go ahead and search for a button and drag one out. That looks pretty good to me. Auto constraints are saying that's probably a good place to go. Let's trust it. This should say the add because we're trying to add a sound, right? And we'll again make sure that this guy is centered and is a certain space from the text field. So we'll say vertical space in there. All right, so we've got this all in place. Let's go ahead and just take a look at what our app looks like on the simulator. Then we can, you know, decide is there any sort of last changes we need before we tick off this box of visually the app looks great. So here we've got our app up and running. This looks really good. We hit a plus button here. Look at that. We've got this nice record, play, sound name. That's all centered. If I, you know, type some stuff, it shows up in the middle. That looks really, really good. So the last thing that I'd like to do before moving forward, because I know visually everything is good, but I'd like to have the actual view controller files behind these set up, as well as all the connections from like the buttons and the text fields, stuff like that. So what we want to do is first create a table view controller. So I'm going to right click this group and say new file. I want a Cocoa Touch class, and I'm looking for a subclass of UI table view controller. So I was lucky enough that that was auto in there, but if not, you can just type out UI table view controller. And then for the class name, call this whatever you'd like, but I'm going to suggest something like sounds table view controller. This telling us it's going to list all the sounds inside of a table view. That's a nice descriptive name. So we'll go ahead and create that. With this file created, I'm going to move it up by its friends so it's, you know, sort of easier for us to see up there. And then I'm going to come back to the main storyboard here. I usually put my storyboard after my view controller, so I'm going to switch that there. There we go. And inside my storyboard, I'm going to say, you know what, this view controller here, if you go up here, you can specify that its class is the sounds table view controller. So I'm going to do capital sounds table view controller. As you do the autocomplete, it's very important. So as you're typing, hit enter or tab on that. It'll sort of connect everything for you. I've seen issues with students that don't do that, but once that's in place, now this visual view controller is connected with that code view controller. Let's do the same thing here for this new sound. So I'm going to right click this group, say new file, Cocoa Touch class, and this one should just be a regular old UI view controller. There we go. And I'm going to call this add sound view controller. Okay. Go ahead and create that, and I'm going to move it up by its friend. And we also want to have this connected in the storyboard. So we're going to select this view controller and say your class is add sound view controller. Hit enter or tab on that so that it goes ahead and does the autocomplete for you there. So with that all connected, the next thing that we want to do is make sure that these buttons, this text field, these are all connected with our view controller. So let's open up our sound view controller. I want to do a little bit of cleaning up here first. So we don't need this did receive memory warning. This navigation stuff, we can go ahead and get rid of that. We should just have class with a view did load function. Let's give some space up top here where we could add a lot of things, and we also need some space down below. So with that in place, we'll save this, come back to the storyboard, and we're going to select, for example, start with the record button. So let's go ahead and do a split screen here. Now for everything on the screen here, we want to have access to both the buttons and the actions that come from them. With the text field, that's a little bit different. We don't need the action from that. But for example, this record button, we want to add it up first at the top of the file as an outlet. And we're going to call this the record button. Okay, simple enough. This is, the button used for recording. We need it as an outlet so that we can change it once they hit record for it to say, stop, and we can make it enabled, disabled, whatever we need to do. And so then down below, we're going to make an action though for when this is tapped. So we're going to do a control drag, make sure that it's an action, and we're going to say record tap. Maybe it was to specify here, record button tapped. Okay, so we'll go ahead and connect that. Next, let's take the play button and let's do a little control drag here. Again, we want this to be an outlet, so we're going to call this play button. It's ultimately going to be like, the play pause situation here, but let's just go ahead and say play for now. So we'll connect that up, and then we're going to do a control drag down below. We're going to call this play button tap. Oh, make sure that this is an action. That could have been bad news for us. Play button tapped, it's an action. Go ahead and connect that. And boom, we have that there. Now we're going to move on to the text field here. This one's only an outlet, so I'll just bring this up and I'm just going to call this name text field. Pretty boring, standard. We've got that. But then this add button, again, we want it to be an outlet and an action. So we're going to do control drag up here. We'll just go ahead and call this add button as an outlet. And then we want it also as an action. And so we'll go ahead and do a control drag here and call this add button tapped. Oh, and you can see I did it as an outlet. So maybe this is a good teaching moment. If you accidentally add an outlet when you meant an action, you have to delete the mistaken outlet, in this case, add button tapped. Then you also have to go to this button, open the right side menu, go to connections and say, oh, it's connected to two things, add button tap. So I don't want the tapped, I'll X that. Now I can go back and click and drag, and this time be smarter and say action. And then I can say add button tap is an action. Okay, so let's go back to full screen by hitting this, and we'll go to our add sound view controller. Let's go ahead and put these things in order. For me, it sort of helps to have them, in the appearance that they show on the screen. It's not necessary, but this just helps me. So I've got record button, the play button, the text field, and the add button. That all looks really solid. Then down below, this is where it especially helps me, the order of these functions when I'm searching for them. The first thing that someone can do is record, so I'm going to put that up at the top. Then they can play, so we'll go ahead and put that next. And finally, they can add that, so we'll go ahead and put that at the end there. And with this all in place, we're at a fabulous place to start adding things. Visually, our app looks great. It's everything that we wanted here inside of our little sketch. Looks perfect. Now it's just a matter of actually implementing the code. So some of you might be thinking, ugh, that was so boring going all over this stuff. But we are at a great place now